Daniel Whitmore was a man who moved through life like a chess grandmaster, each step deliberate, every word carefully measured. As the CEO of Whitmore Global, a titan in the industries of technology and logistics, his name carried a weight that few could claim. His success was not an inheritance but the product of grit, intellect, and a vision sharper than a diamond's edge. The empire he built spanned continents, with offices gleaming in the world's most vibrant metropolises. At his side was Elise, his wife of 15 years, who was as dazzling as she was intelligent. A former ballerina turned philanthropist, she moved effortlessly through the elite circles, her charm and grace winning hearts and alliances. Together, they were the power couple that graced magazine covers, their names whispered with admiration at charity galas and boardroom meetings alike. On a brisk evening in mid-October, the Whitmores opened the doors to their penthouse on Manhattan's Upper East Side, hosting an intimate celebration for Whitmore Global's latest venture, a revolutionary green energy solution poised to disrupt global markets. The penthouse, perched atop a glittering high-rise, was a testament to Daniel's discerning taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the city, while crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over an art collection that included works by Monet and Warhol. The guest list was as exclusive as the event itself. Industry titans mingled with the upper echelon of society. CEOs clinked glasses with senators, while influencers exchanged pleasantries with tech innovators. Amid the flowing champagne and curated hors d'oeuvres, Daniel kept an attentive eye on the room, his ability to read people as much a hallmark of his success as his financial acumen. It was during this observation that Daniel first noticed a flicker of something too subtle for most to catch. Elise, resplendent in an emerald gown that matched the glint of her wedding ring, exchanged a glance with Marcus Tully, Whitmore Global's CFO. It wasn't overt, not the kind of look that would stir immediate suspicion, but Daniel's instinct caught the underlying familiarity. It lingered just long enough to unsettle him. As the evening progressed, Daniel pushed the thought aside, attributing his unease to fatigue or overanalysis. Marcus had been by his side for nearly a decade, a loyal second-in-command who had helped him navigate the treacherous waters of corporate growth. Elise had always been his anchor, the one person who stood unwaveringly beside him in both triumph and tribulation. Together, they represented a partnership as much professional as personal. Yet, even amidst the laughter and toasts, the sense of something amiss refused to dissipate. Daniel's gaze followed Elise as she floated across the room, her laughter like a delicate melody in the otherwise bustling space. She and Marcus shared another glance, and this time, the faintest of smiles passed between them. Polished as Elise was, her composure betrayed nothing further. As the final guest trickled out and the city's skyline glittered against the inky night, Daniel stood by the window, swirling the last of his whiskey. Elise approached him, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. "Successful evening?" she murmured, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Indeed," Daniel replied, his tone smooth but contemplative. "Everything is falling into place." If Elise noticed the edge in his voice, she didn't comment. Instead, she tightened her grip on his arm, a picture of wedded contentment. But Daniel's mind was already running through the evening, replaying the seemingly inconsequential moments that now stood out like loose threads on an otherwise perfect tapestry. The chessboard of his life had shifted, and though he didn't yet understand how or why, Daniel knew one thing for certain: a storm was brewing, and he would need to be ready. 2 weeks passed, and the memory of that night had almost faded into the background of Daniel Whitmore's busy life. The launch of Whitmore Global's newest venture dominated his schedule, leaving little time to dwell on fleeting glances or subtle smiles. Meetings bled into one another, phone calls stacked like dominoes, and his evenings were consumed by reviewing endless reports. Yet, as the days wore on, a quiet unease began to fester in the back of his mind. It was a Tuesday evening when the first drop of suspicion pierced the calm. Elise kissed him on the cheek, her perfume light and familiar, as she prepared to leave for a charity meeting. She wore a simple but elegant navy dress, her hair swept into a loose chignon, and Daniel barely glanced up from his tablet to say goodbye. "I'll be late, so don't wait up," she said, her voice light as she adjusted her coat. "Of course," Daniel replied, distracted by a proposal that required his approval. Hours later, as the clock in his study struck midnight, his phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Tully. The text was short and innocuous. Something urgent came up. "Let's reschedule dinner." Daniel furrowed his brow, briefly reminded of Elise's absence. It was a coincidence, surely. Marcus was often unpredictable with his schedule. Yet, the coincidence lingered like a faint whisper in the room, nagging at Daniel. The next morning brought something more concrete. Daniel, known for his meticulous attention to detail, had developed a habit of scanning over household bills as a matter of routine. When he came across the phone records, a name stood out: Frederick Hughes. It was an unfamiliar name, one that bore no significance to him. Ordinarily, he might have dismissed it, attributing it to one of Elise's endless charity contacts, but the timing piqued his interest. Hughes' number had appeared several times during hours Elise claimed to have been at events or meetings. Intrigued but not yet alarmed, Daniel asked their shared assistant about Hughes under the guise of organizing a donor luncheon. To his surprise, Hughes had no known connections to Elise's charities. A small but undeniable weight settled in Daniel's chest. His instincts, honed over decades of steering Whitmore Global through treacherous waters, flared to life. By the end of the week, his curiosity had turned into a calculated decision. The logical part of his mind balked at the choice, but his instincts overruled it. Discretion was paramount. He hired a private investigator, someone with a sterling reputation for uncovering truths buried beneath layers of deceit. It felt beneath him to resort to such measures, yet he reasoned it was better to know than to let doubt fester. The waiting was agonizing. Daniel poured himself into his work, finding solace in the numbers and strategy that had always brought him clarity. Yet, late at night, when the city was still, and the only sound was the hum of the penthouse refrigerator, his mind replayed fleeting moments: Elise's casual explanations for late returns, Marcus' text messages, and the unfamiliar name that now seemed to shadow his thoughts. 2 weeks later, the report landed on his desk in an unassuming envelope. Daniel hesitated, his heart pounding as he opened it. The details were meticulous, the photographs damning. Elise had not been at a charity meeting that Tuesday. She had been at a high-end hotel, her arrival overlapping perfectly with that of Marcus Tully. And Frederick Hughes. He wasn't a philanthropist but a corporate lawyer infamous for dismantling businesses. The implications were clear. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a conspiracy. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the photographs. The life he had so carefully built now seemed fragile, precarious. Yet, despite the rising tide of an anger and hurt, his mind sharpened sharp purpose. He would uncover the full scope of this betrayal and deal with it as he always did, with precision and absolute control. The report sat on Daniel's desk, its contents a cruel revelation that cut deeper than he had expected. He had braced himself for the possibility of an affair, but the depth of Elise's betrayal went beyond personal infidelity. This was professional treachery, a knife aimed directly at the heart of Whitmore Global, his life's work. Elise had not acted alone. Marcus Tully, the CFO he had trusted for years, had been embezzling funds, siphoning money into accounts cleverly concealed behind layers of corporate shell companies. The investigators' findings revealed that Frederick Hughes, the lawyer whose name had first drawn Daniel's suspicion, was no stranger to high-stakes corporate warfare. He specialized in leveraging insider information to dismantle companies from within. And Elise? She was the link that bound them all together, orchestrating meetings, facilitating introductions, and betraying the very man whose success had given her the lifestyle she now enjoyed. For the next several days, Daniel carried the burden of this knowledge silently. He went about his routine as if nothing had changed, attending board meetings, reviewing proposals, and even hosting a charity gala alongside Elise. The mask of composure he wore during these events was flawless, honed through years of dealing with high-pressure negotiations. No one, not even Elise, suspected that the man they knew as confident and in control was simmering with cold fury beneath the surface. In private, however, Daniel worked tirelessly to dissect the conspiracy. He combed through the investigator's report, aligning the evidence with his own records. Each document he reviewed unraveled another thread of deceit: secret accounts filled with funds siphoned from company profits, emails between Marcus and Elise detailing plans to sell proprietary company data to Whitmore Global's fiercest competitor, and messages to Frederick Hughes discussing the legal maneuvering required to gut the company without leaving a trail. Elise's role was not merely that of a bystander. She had been meeting Marcus in luxury hotels, her loyalty to their shared schemes apparently forged through their clandestine relationship. The betrayal wasn't limited to a physical affair, it was a comprehensive strategy aimed at dismantling Daniel's empire. Despite the mounting evidence, Daniel didn't confront Elise. To act impulsively was to lose the upper hand, and he had no intention of giving her or her accomplices that satisfaction. Instead, he prepared meticulously. He began by isolating the vulnerable points in his company, identifying the accounts Marcus had tampered with, and quietly moving assets to secure locations. Trusted confidants within Whitmore Global were brought into the fold. tasked with monitoring the financial activities that Marcus oversaw. Daniel also met discreetly with his legal team, instructing them to begin drafting contingency plans for the inevitable fallout. One evening, as Daniel sat alone in his study with the city's lights twinkling through the penthouse windows, Elise entered with her characteristic grace. "You've been working late again," she remarked casually, setting down a cup of tea. Daniel merely smiled. "The price of running an empire," he replied. The words were deliberately neutral, but his mind churned with the knowledge that this empire would not crumble not under their hands. The unraveling was nearly complete. All that remained was the moment of reckoning, and Daniel would ensure it would be on his terms, in his time. Daniel Whitmore was a man who thrived on strategy. Over the years, he had turned seemingly insurmountable obstacles into opportunities, outmaneuvering rivals with precision and foresight. Now, as he sat in his study late at night, staring at the evidence of betrayal that had been meticulously laid before him, his resolve hardened. He would strike back not out of anger, but with the calculated precision of a master tactician. His first move was subtle, almost imperceptible to those who weren't looking. He began shifting key assets to offshore accounts under the guise of routine financial restructuring. The transfers were strategically timed and masked by routine business transactions, making them invisible to anyone who might be monitoring Whitmore Global's financial health. Meanwhile, he quietly restructured internal roles, delegating critical responsibilities to individuals he trusted implicitly. This effectively marginalized Marcus Tully without raising suspicion. As weeks passed, Daniel fed false data into the company's financial systems, creating a facade of vulnerabilities that he knew Marcus and Elise would exploit. Every doctored report, every misleading email was bait, carefully laid to lure them further into their own trap. Marcus, convinced that his embezzlement was still undetected, moved with growing confidence, while Elise's involvement in the scheme deepened as she coordinated with their competitor. Daniel's next step involved a quiet meeting with the company's board of directors. While maintaining an air of normalcy, he subtly alerted them to discrepancies in the company's financial performance, presenting just enough evidence to earn their trust without revealing the full scope of the betrayal. He framed the issue as an internal audit, ensuring the board's support without tipping off Marcus. Behind the scenes, Daniel worked closely with his legal team and cybersecurity experts to tighten the noose. They unearthed every trace of Marcus's fraudulent activities, offshore accounts, falsified invoices, and email trails that linked him directly to Elise and Frederick Hughes. Each piece of evidence was catalogued and stored, ready for the moment when it would be unleashed. The day of reckoning arrived at the annual shareholder meeting, a cornerstone event for Whitmore Global. The room buzzed with anticipation as investors and executives gathered to hear updates on the company's performance. Marcus was confident, his prepared presentation bolstered by what he believed were flawless financial reports. Elise sat in the audience, her expression serene, betraying none of the storm brewing beneath her polished exterior. When Marcus concluded his presentation, Daniel rose from his seat at the head of the table. "Thank you, Marcus, for your insights," he began, his tone calm, but with an unmistakable edge. "However, I believe our shareholders deserve full transparency." With a click of a remote, the projector screen lit up, displaying the real financial data. Gasps rippled through the room as Marcus's embezzlement was laid bare. Security personnel moved swiftly, escorting him from the room as the weight of his actions sank in. Then came the piece de resistance, a series of emails and transactions linking Elise to the scheme, displayed for all to see. Elise's mask of composure faltered, her pale face a stark contrast to the fiery confidence she had carried into the room. Daniel's counterstrike was complete. The empire he had built was no longer under threat, and those who had sought to destroy him were left to face the consequences of their own greed. The penthouse was eerily silent, the kind of quiet that follows the conclusion of a storm. The events of the shareholder meeting had shaken the foundations of Daniel Whitmore's carefully constructed life, but his empire remained standing. The conspirators Marcus Tully and Frederick Hughes were facing legal action, their reputations and careers in shambles. Elise, his wife of 15 years, had retreated from the penthouse in disgrace, leaving behind a life of luxury and trust she had so callously betrayed. That evening, Daniel returned home alone. The city lights sparkled through the vast windows, a reminder of the empire he had reclaimed. The penthouse, once vibrant with the presence of staff, guests, and Elise's elegant touch, now felt like a mausoleum of memories. On the bed in the master suite, where years of shared intimacy had once flourished, Daniel placed an envelope. Inside were divorce papers, finalized and unyielding, accompanied by a single handwritten note. "Trust is a rare gift, easily broken and rarely mended. Closure works both ways. Goodbye. He stood for a moment, gazing at the note, then turned and left the room. Later that night, Elise called. Her voice was shaky, laced with desperation and regret. Daniel, please. I was going to tell you everything. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Marcus manipulated me. I was just lost. Daniel listened in silence, letting her words spill out like water from a broken dam. Finally, he spoke, his voice cold but calm. You begged for my trust, Elise. Do you remember? You said trust was the foundation of love, and I gave you mine without hesitation, but you destroyed it for greed and lies. There's nothing left to salvage. Please, Daniel, she whispered. You don't understand. Stop. His tone carried the finality of a slammed door. This isn't about understanding. It's about consequences. You chose this path, Elise, and you'll walk it alone. Before she could respond, he ended the call and set the phone down with an air of finality. For Daniel, the conversation marked the true end of their relationship. The next morning, Elise's belongings were removed from the penthouse. Daniel instructed his assistant to send them to an address she had provided, a modest apartment far from the opulence she once knew. The life Elise had built on betrayal and deceit was unraveling, and Daniel had no intention of offering her a lifeline. For Daniel, closure didn't come from revenge, but from clarity. The empire he had built was intact, but he was no longer the man who had shared it with Elise. He had been tested in ways he never anticipated, and though the scars remained, they also served as reminders of his resilience. That evening, Daniel poured himself a glass of whiskey and stood by the window, gazing out at the city that never slept. The light stretched endlessly before him, a reminder of what he had built and what he had endured. Though the bitter taste of betrayal lingered, there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing he had faced the storm and emerged stronger. The past was behind him, locked away in the penthouse that now seemed less like a home and more like a chapter of a story he had finished writing. The future, he knew, would be his to shape, free from the shadows of deceit.